Long ago, in a time hidden from memory, there existed a book few have ever seen and even fewer have dared to read. It tells a story too perilous for ordinary eyes, a story of angels who defied the heavens, of unions forbidden, and of giants who once walked the earth. These angels were called the Watchers. They were sent to watch over humanity, to guide and protect. Yet, in their curiosity and desire, they revealed knowledge mortals were never meant to hold. From their forbidden descent came the Nephilim, colossal beings, born of heaven and earth, whose presence shook the very foundations of the world. This is not a tale whispered in passing. It is woven into the oldest texts, carried through traditions, remembered in shadows. Tonight, we open that lost book, the Book of Enoch, and follow the secret paths of the fallen. We will trace their steps, uncover their transgressions, and glimpse the shadow they may still cast over the world today. Listen carefully, for these are words once sealed in darkness, and their story has waited a long time to be heard. Before we step deeper into the shadows of the Watchers and the Nephilim, we must first understand the man whose name is carved into this forbidden text. Enoch, a name whispered only briefly in the Hebrew Bible, yet wrapped in astonishing mystery. Great-grandfather to Prophet Noah, the lone survivor of the flood's fury, Enoch is said to have been taken into heaven without ever tasting death. No grave, no farewell, only vanishing. In the Hebrew imagination, he stands as a living threshold between realms, neither fully mortal nor entirely divine. This alone would have secured his place as a figure of wonder. But there is more, for out of Enoch's name came a collection of writings, visions, and prophecies that claim to reveal what he saw when the heavens were opened to him. These writings, known as the Book of Enoch, speak of angels descending to earth, of secrets whispered in the night, of the great corruption that followed, and of the judgment that was to come. Yet despite its profound narrative, the Book of Enoch was not granted a place in the biblical canon. To the early guardians of sacred scripture, its visions were too strange, its claims too perilous. It told of beings whose existence threatened the very boundaries between heaven and earth. It suggested truths that could not be easily tamed within the doctrines of faith. So it was cast out, branded apocryphal, forbidden. And yet, the Book of Enoch did not perish with time, nor was it erased by the silence of forgotten centuries. Though excluded from the biblical canon and suppressed in much of the Western world, it found sanctuary in unexpected places. In the caves near Qumran, fragments of its words were sealed within the Dead Sea Scrolls, whispered remnants of an ancient vision. In scraps of Greek and Aramaic, it flickered like half-remembered prophecy, scattered yet unextinguished. But far from the centers of empire, in the highlands of Ethiopia, it endured in its entirety, treasured and proclaimed as holy scripture by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. There, it was not a fragment or echo, but a living book, passed from hand to hand, chanted in liturgy, bound into the heart of faith. And beyond Ethiopia, its spirit refused to fade. Hints of its visions ripple through Jewish mysticism, through early Christian writings, and even through the traditions of Islam, where echoes of Enoch survive under the name of Prophet Idris. Across faiths and centuries, the book endured like a buried ember. Its glow dimmed but never extinguished, waiting for the day when curious hands would brush away the dust and uncover its strange light once more. Why was it set apart? Was it simply a text too strange for the canon? Or did it carry visions so vast and unsettling that few dared to preserve them openly, glimpses of beings and truths even the faithful spoke of only in whispers. And so, the mystery endures. Enoch, prophet and witness to the heavens, left behind a book that holds the keys to a story unlike any other, a story that begins not in the realm of men, but in the secret councils of heaven itself. According to the ancient text known as the Book of Enoch, there was a time when the boundaries between heaven and earth were crossed. 200 angels sent as watchers to guide and guard humanity turned from their appointed place. They looked down upon the earth and desired what was not theirs to take. The Book of Enoch tells how they gathered upon the heights of Mount Hermon, a mountain straddling the borders of ancient Israel and Lebanon, long regarded as a sacred peak. There, under the leadership of a mighty angel named Semyaza, they made a solemn pact. They bound themselves with oaths so that none would turn back, swearing that they would descend together to the world of men. This is not a legend invented in later centuries. It is part of the apocryphal tradition preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and echoed in fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls. In those manuscripts, the names of the leaders are recorded. Azazel, who would later be associated with wilderness and scapegoats in Leviticus, Arachiel, Kokabiel, Sariel, and others whose names drift like shadows through time. These were not the watchers as they had been sent, guardians and teachers, but transgressors, stepping outside the order set for them. Enoch's writings speak of them imparting forbidden knowledge, the arts of metal and weapon making, the secrets of the stars, enchantments, and hidden lore. In Jewish apocryphal literature, they are portrayed as the ones who corrupted humankind. In later Christian writings, their rebellion would echo in the concept of fallen angels. Thus begins the descent, not a gentle guiding of mortals, but a fall, a chosen fall from the heights of heaven to the dust of earth. It is here, upon Mount Hermon, that the shadow of the Watchers stretches into history and myth alike. But their fall did not end on the slopes of Hermon. Having crossed the boundary, the Watchers began to pour out the hidden things of heaven upon the earth. The Book of Enoch records that Azazel, one of their chiefs, taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, the forging of blades from iron, arrows hardened in fire, weapons that would turn brother against brother and drench the ground with blood. To women he revealed the arts of adornment, bracelets and rings, powders and paints, beautifying of the eyelids, and the secrets of ornamentation. What had been unknown became suddenly common, and desire and violence multiplied together. Other names surface in the text: Arachiel, teaching signs of the earth; Kokabiel, the courses of the stars; Sariel, the paths of the moon; Barachiel, the signs of lightning. What had once been the guarded knowledge of the heavens was now scattered across the dust. Sorcery, enchantments, root-cutting, and charms, all were whispered into mortal ears. This is how, according to the Enochic tradition preserved in Ethiopia and echoed in fragments at Qumran, humanity was corrupted, not merely by temptation, but by instruction, by a download of power it could not carry without consequence. And across cultures, we hear an echo of the same theme: divine beings gifting forbidden knowledge. The Greek poet Hesiod wrote of Prometheus, who stole fire from Olympus and gave it to mankind, sparking both civilization and punishment. In Mesopotamian myths, gods entrusted humans with arts and crafts at great cost. Over and over, the pattern repeats: a gift from heaven that both elevates and destroys. So it was with the Watchers. What seemed like gifts were in truth a burden, knowledge too heavy for human hands, secrets that tilted the balance of the world. In the words of Enoch, there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. The Watchers had not simply fallen, they had drawn humanity into their fall, seeding the earth with a knowledge that would echo through every age. But the story did not end with forbidden knowledge alone. From the forbidden unions of the Watchers and mortal women came a generation unlike any the world had seen before. The Book of Enoch calls them the Nephilim, giants of vast stature, beings whose very existence blurred the line between heaven and earth. They were not merely tall or strong. They were portrayed as immense, ravenous, and filled with violence. The writings describe how their hunger knew no limits. At first, they consumed the fruits of the earth and the herds of men. But when the land could no longer satisfy their appetites, their gaze turned upon humanity itself. They devoured flesh and spilled blood, becoming a terror to all who lived beneath the sun. What began as a secret union had now birthed chaos that stretched across the earth. These tales do not stand alone. In the Mesopotamian myths, we find the Anunnaki, ancient gods said to have descended to earth, granting knowledge and ruling over men. While not described exactly as giants, they too were depicted as mighty figures who straddled the realms of the divine and the human. In the Greek world, the memory echoes in the Titans, colossal beings who warred against the Olympians, and in the demigods, the offspring of gods and mortals, whose extraordinary gifts often carried both glory and ruin. Even in Canaanite and Ugaritic traditions, we encounter the Rephaim, shadowy figures tied to both death and the memory of ancient giants. What all these traditions seem to preserve is a haunting memory that at some point, beings greater than men walked the earth, beings who left behind both awe and devastation. The Nephilim of Enoch's account fit into this universal pattern, hybrids born of heaven's rebellion and earth's innocence, whose strength became their corruption and whose appetites unbalanced creation itself. Thus, in Enoch's vision, the Nephilim were not simply a race of giants. They were a living symbol of transgression, the offspring of a union that should never have been, and a reminder of the peril that comes when the boundaries between the divine and the mortal are broken. Enoch is chosen to deliver the verdict. In the Book of Enoch, he becomes more than a prophet. He is a scribe of judgment, a voice of heaven sent into a corrupted world. In its pages, the Watchers plead with him to intercede, to write a petition for mercy. But the answer he brings back from the throne of God is not forgiveness, but doom. The text describes how the great archangels Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel are dispatched as executors of this judgment. Enoch records the decree: the Watchers are to be seized, bound with chains of fire, and hurled into the depths of a dark abyss until the final day of reckoning. This abyss is called by names that echo across Scripture and tradition: the bottomless pit, Tartarus, Sheol, a place reserved for rebellious spirits. Even the New Testament epistle of 2 Peter alludes to this punishment, saying that angels who sinned were cast down to Tartarus and kept in chains until judgment. But the sentence upon the Watchers does not stop the havoc of their children. The Nephilim, giants born of forbidden union, have filled the earth with blood. Their violence and hunger threaten to tear creation apart. The Book of Enoch tells how Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel, the teacher of weapons and war, in a desert place and cover him with jagged stones. Yet still the children of the Watchers ravaged the world, and so the great flood rises as the final act of cleansing. In the biblical book of Genesis, it is framed as a divine response to a world filled with violence. In Enoch's account, the flood is directly tied to the corruption sown by the Watchers and their offspring. Noah, forewarned, becomes the vessel of survival. His ark carries not only life, but also the memory of a world before judgment. When the waters recede, the giants are gone, their bodies dissolved, but their spirits, according to Enoch, linger as wandering entities upon the earth, the origin of unclean spirits that trouble mankind. What survives are fragments, the bones of legends buried under layers of time, the echoes of names whispered in ancient texts, and the shadows of a story that once linked heaven's rebellion to earth's ruin. Thus ends the age of the Watchers and the Nephilim, not with mercy, but with chains, floodwaters, and silence, leaving behind only myths that still ripple through the world's oldest stories. Yet even after the flood, whispers remain that not all was erased. Though Scripture tells us the Nephilim were judged and their fathers bound, later traditions began to wonder, could fragments of that bloodline, or the spirits born from their corruption, have endured? In Jewish Apocrypha and early Christian thought, the disembodied souls of the giants were often described as the origin of demons, restless, half-born spirits condemned to wander. Church fathers like Justin Martyr and Athenagoras echoed this, portraying demons as the lingering breath of the Nephilim. Some modern writers go further, imagining that this ancient defiance will return at the end of days through the Antichrist, the man of sin described in Christian prophecy not as settled doctrine, but as a chilling interpretation at the intersection of myth and eschatology. And within Islamic tradition, a parallel shadow looms in the figure of Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the great deceiver. In the Hadith literature, Dajjal is described as a one-eyed false messiah who will emerge near the end of time, sowing chaos before being destroyed by the Messiah, Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus. A famous narration in Sahih Muslim recounts how a group of sailors were driven by storm to an unknown island in the east. There they encountered a chained figure who questioned them about three matters: the state of the date palms of Bison, the waters of the Sea of Galilee, and the unlettered prophet who had arisen among the Arabs. When they returned to the Prophet Muhammad and told him what they had seen, he confirmed that this figure was indeed the Dajjal. Those sailors embraced Islam thereafter. This account places Dajjal not as a distant myth, but as a presence already bound and waiting, hidden in the world's forgotten corners until his appointed hour. Some interpreters have drawn comparisons between the Antichrist of Christianity and the Dajjal of Islam, seeing in both the return of an ancient rebellion, a being who deceives, who imitates divinity, and who carries within him the echo of that old defiance traced back to the Watchers and their progeny. None of these speculations belong to the central doctrines of faith, yet they endure as powerful reminders of humanity's fear that what once corrupted the world might one day return, whether as the Antichrist or as the Dajjal, figures not merely of myth, but of eschatological terror, waiting at the horizon of time. Across the vast tapestry of human belief, the same shadowed tale seems to reappear, told in different tongues, dressed in different symbols, but echoing the same truth. Beings from beyond who crossed forbidden boundaries. In Christianity, the fallen angels are remembered not only through the Watchers of Enoch, but also through the rebellion of Lucifer himself, once a radiant spirit cast down for his pride. In Islam, we find Iblis, the djinn, who refused God's command to bow before Adam, claiming superiority in the fire from which he was made. His defiance mirrors the very heart of the Watcher's transgression, pride, disobedience, and the refusal to remain within the bounds set by heaven. The Quran also tells of two mysterious angels, Harut and Marut, who were sent to Babylon as a trial for humanity. They taught men sorcery, but only with the warning, "We are but a temptation, so do not fall into disbelief." Here again we see the theme of divine beings giving forbidden knowledge, knowledge that tests the very soul of mankind. Beyond the Abrahamic faiths, the same archetypes rise. In the deserts of Arabia and Persia, the djinn are said to be spirits of smokeless fire, some righteous, others rebellious, often blurring the line between helper and corrupter. Their world runs parallel to ours, much like the unseen legacies of the Watchers. In Greece, the Titans waged war against the Olympian gods, towering figures who sought to storm heaven itself. Their rebellion ended in chains and prisons deep within the earth, a fate strikingly similar to the Watchers bound in the abyss. In Hindu tradition, the Asuras began as divine beings themselves, but through rivalry and ambition became adversaries of the Devas, struggling endlessly for dominion over the cosmos. Like the Nephilim and their fathers, their story is one of divine bloodline corrupted by desire for power. Even in Sumerian myth, we encounter echoes. The Anunnaki, great divine beings, some revered as creators, others feared as bringers of destruction. Their mingling with mankind shaped myths that lingered across Mesopotamia. These stories, separated by oceans and centuries, carry a striking resonance. Whether named angels, djinn, titans, asuras, or Anunnaki, humanity has remembered again and again the same truth, that when beings of heaven reach too far into the world of men, the balance of creation is shaken, and so the pattern repeats across faiths, across civilizations, across memory itself. A warning that the boundary between heaven and earth is not to be crossed without consequence. Still the questions linger, whispers that refuse to die. Were the Watchers only parables dressed in sacred ink? Symbols of lust, pride, and the hunger that gnaws at the human spirit? Or did the ancients record something they dared not name outright? Fragments of a memory too dangerous to tell plainly? Some scholars soothe themselves with allegory, insisting these tales were only warnings. Yet others hear something else in the echo, the faint remembrance of beings who truly descended, who bent heaven's laws and left their mark upon the earth. Then there are those who look beyond Scripture. They whisper that the Watchers were not angels at all, but intruders from the stars, descending in fire and light. Their gifts of metallurgy, enchantments, and the reading of stars may have been fragments of a science mankind was never meant to know. To our ancestors, their power was divine. To us, it may still be incomprehensible. Psychologists speak in colder tones. They call the Watchers archetypes, shadows of the mind, embodiments of humanity's obsession with forbidden knowledge. But even they admit, myths this persistent do not survive by chance. Something in them speaks to an ancient terror buried deep within us, And still the story endures, carried in Ethiopian scripture, whispered in desert legends, reflected in the myths of Titans, Anunnaki, and djinn. It will not die. Like a shadow cast from beyond the veil, it clings to every culture, every age. Perhaps because we know, deep down, that the border between heaven and earth is thinner than we dare to believe. Perhaps because we fear the descent did not end with the flood. So, the question waits, heavy and unresolved. Were the Watchers nothing but myth? Or do their footprints still press faintly in the soil beneath our feet? And if they do, what else waits in the dark, watching, patient, ready to descend again? The Book of Enoch does not end with triumph. It ends with silence, a silence heavy with chains, sealed in darkness. The voices of the Watchers fade, but their shadows linger across time, whispering still to those willing to listen. We have walked the hidden paths tonight, from the mountain where angels fell, to the birth of giants, to the flood that sought to erase their memory. Yet questions remain, unsettled, trembling at the edge of belief. Were these tales only allegories? Moral warnings dressed in myth? Or were they fragments of a forbidden history scattered across cultures, waiting to be pieced together? The Watchers remind us that the line between heaven and earth is fragile, that once it is crossed, the world can never be the same. Perhaps their chains are real, perhaps only symbolic, but either way, their story still calls out, haunting us like an echo from a forgotten age. Now, I leave the final question to you. What do you believe? Were the Watchers nothing more than legend? Or did they leave footprints still buried in the soil of our world? Share your thoughts in the comments and join us as we turn the next page of these hidden chronicles. For tonight's tale may be ending, but the shadows are far from finished.